Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for coming to the Porthill Land Port of Entry Environmental Assessment public meeting. My name is Robbie Baldwin. I'm a contractor for GSA, and I'm going to be our moderator and kind of electronic operator today. I'll be monitoring the chat. You guys can see the message that I just sent to everybody, hopefully. Just explaining that please keep your microphones off while we're speaking. There will be time at the end for formal comments and for questions related to the slides. At the same time, the chat's going to be open at all times. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in there and someone on the project team will answer them at their earliest convenience. Also a reminder to everyone, I'm sure you saw the drop-down menu, but this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the project website after the fact. And so with that, Emily, I will turn it over to you to get us going.
Great. Thank you, Robbie. So I want to go ahead and welcome everyone again and extend a great big thank you for making the time in your schedules to attend the General Services Administration's Region 10 Public Involvement Meeting regarding the environmental review portion of the proposed Porthill Land Port of Entry Modernization and Expansion Project. The environmental review portion for this project is led by the National Environmental Policy Act, which you'll hear referred to as NEPA throughout this presentation, and which will also be explained later by Saul, who is serving as the Region 10 environmental consultant. And to give you an overview of Region 10, we cover the states of Washington, Idaho, Alaska, and Oregon. And however, for these region projects, these land port of entry projects, we are currently planned within Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. This includes Linden, Sumas, and Blaine, Washington, Alcan, Alaska, and Porthill, Idaho, which is the port that we will be discussing this evening. And so let's go ahead and get started with introductions. My name is Emily Grimes, and I serve as the Region 10 Environmental Program Manager. And one of the programs under my responsibility is the NEPA program. So for the environmental review portion of these projects, I will be serving as the NEPA project manager and your contact for these projects as well. And I'll go ahead and let Melissa Hybre continue with introductions.
Hi, my name is Melissa Hybre. I'm the project manager for this project, Porthill project. I'm also the project manager for the Pack Highway lane expansion. Kim Gant, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Kim Gant. I'm the Historic Preservation Officer for Region 10.
Then we have Leon from Solve.
Yeah, Leon Kolinkevich. I'm a program manager at Solve, which is serving as a consultant to GSA on this project. And I'll be giving a brief overview of the NEPA process tonight.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Oh, and hi, I'm Natalie Jacques. I'm the project manager with Solve, as we've said, supporting GSA with this environmental assessment.
Thank you, Natalie. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And you already heard from Robbie. He introduced himself as well. So I'll go ahead and get started, and briefly point out the purpose of having this public meeting. And it is informational. GSA is striving to be transparent with the public and other agencies with what these construction projects are proposing. And one of the best ways to accomplish that is by sharing this preliminary information with you, all the stakeholders. And so that's something I will stress throughout this presentation, is that this information is preliminary. Nothing has been set in stone, no decisions have been made. And this is one of the main purposes of having this meeting and getting the public input and other agencies' input. And like I said, it's important, not like I said, but it is important to not just provide your comments. We also look for positive takes as well. Anyone in support of these projects, those matter as well. So please don't feel like if it's something different than that, we'll take everything. Everything matters. Everything will be reviewed and addressed during this environmental review portion, and it's all greatly appreciated. And then I'll go ahead and point out again, the meeting is being recorded with closed captioning, and it will be uploaded probably within the week after this meeting is over, within the week. So to the designated Porthill project webpage, which the link will be provided in the meeting as well, the meeting presentation. And so I do encourage you, for anyone that you know was not able to take the time to make this meeting today, please share with them and let them know and encourage them to watch this presentation, to do any reviews that they want, and participate in this current public comment period that we're having. And so I'll go ahead and go over ways to submit your comments. GSA has provided several different options for everyone, which I'll go through as we get to that period in the presentation. But I at least wanted to point out again that the public comment period does end on June 5th. And that during this actual presentation, you can use that chat box to enter any questions or comments that you have. And then at the end of the meeting, when we open up the virtual floor for commenting, we'll start with the chat box. We'll go down there and then we'll open it up for anybody who wants to speak. We're thinking at least starting with 2 minutes initially, but depending on time, if we have plenty of time, we're definitely not going to cut you off and we'll let you finish your train of thought. So I'll go ahead and go over the layout for the meeting. I plan on going over the GSA mission briefly and then our role in these projects. And then we'll discuss project background. The National Environmental Policy Act will be discussed, as well as the alternatives in this project. And then we'll go over the National Historic Preservation Act. And then we'll conclude and go over all the options we have available for commenting. We also have in here, it's in here an acronym slide, because we figure, we'll be going over terms that not everyone will be familiar with, and we will try our best to explain all the terms as we mention them throughout the presentation. But later on, and hopefully you do when you go back and rewatch the presentation, this slide will serve as hopefully helpful to you as you go through and review your documents or review these documents. And I also wanted to point out as well, in the chat box, it's been uploaded. We have several posters and handouts and a comment form available in there as well for everyone to review and download and look at after this presentation as well. So I'll briefly go over the mission of GSA, which is to deliver the best customer experience and value in real estate acquisition and technology services to the government and the American people. In order to do this, we provide centralized procurement for the federal government, which includes offering services and facilities that the federal agencies need to serve the public. We also help federal agencies build and acquire office-based products and other workspace services. And because this was just a very brief overview of our mission, I do highly encourage the link is in here to our GSA's mission and background webpage. It has so much information on where we started under President Truman in 1949 and how we've evolved along with our responsibilities. And I just think it's a really great read if you're unfamiliar with GSA. And another thing that would be important for you to know is how these projects actually came about. So there's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which you'll see referred to as the BIL, and that was signed by President Biden on November 15th of 2021. And its purpose was to invest in our nation's infrastructure, competitiveness, and communities. It's managed under the GSA Land Port of Entry program, which provides funds to modernize and improve these LPOEs at northern and southern borders. And so GSA's role here comes into play where we'll utilize the $3.4 billion provided under that BIL to fund the LPOE construction aspect of the projects. But then we also have CBP will fund operations and support requirements for approved projects as well. And then, because again, this was such a brief overview, I do encourage everyone to visit GSA's Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Construction Projects webpage. You can not only see Region 10's projects, all the status that we have, any documents we have up there for review, but you can see all of the projects that are under this BIL from different regions, the status and what's being proposed. And they're really great reads just to see, and you get a feel of what we're trying to do to just improve these land port of entries and operations for both the public and the federal government. And so I'll go ahead and pass it on to Melissa Hybre to go over the project background.
Have to unmute. Thanks, Emily. So the Porthill Land Port of Entry was built in 1967, which is approximately 3,000 square feet. The port currently has 2 POV lanes and one permit commercial lane. The port is landlocked, with the only means of expansion being to the west of the port, within the proposed purple outline. The current site also includes the decommissioned historical port built in 1930, along with 2 CBP houses. These buildings are not currently included in this project. Porthill Land Port of Entry has no room to expand within its current footprint, and the current port does not have the capacity to keep up with the increased traffic, nor the ability to implement the new technologies to help meet CBP's mission. The new proposed Land Port of Entry will more than double in size, provide the flexibility to allow new technologies as they become available, will add an additional traffic lane and add high-low booths in all the lanes to provide a more efficient traffic flow. GSA and CBP will be working together to develop the proposed port's design, which will take place during the design phase of this project. The project milestones. Currently, we're working through the NEPA and site acquisition process. We plan to have the project development study awarded in July of this year. We estimate the design award date to be April of 2025, with the design phase to go through April of 2026. And then in May of 2026, we will begin construction. The construction will be phased to ensure the port is operational and the impact to the community is low. And then we plan to have the construction completion January of 2028. Now I'll turn this over to Leon.
Thank you, Melissa. Say a few words here about the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. This requires federal agencies to consider the potential impacts of their projects on the human environment. Now, human environment refers both to the natural environment and such resources as wildlife, wetlands, endangered species, and water quality, and the social and economic environment, which includes resources such as human health and safety, noise, and recreation, among other things. GSA's responsibilities under NEPA include considering alternative options, or what we call alternatives, for the proposed action before deciding on taking an action and on which action to take. And then another responsibility is considering public input throughout the NEPA process. This includes input from the public on the types of alternatives that are going to be analyzed and on the specific resource areas that warrant scrutiny in the NEPA document. Next. And one of the things that NEPA also requires a lead agency, in this case GSA, to do is to comply with other relevant laws that are carried out in parallel. There are three in particular that are going to be part of this, as they are part of every NEPA analysis. Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, which requires federal agencies to look at the potential impacts on threatened and endangered species and their potential habitat, especially their designated critical habitat. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act requires federal actions to examine the potential for discharge of fill, pollutants, or dredge material into waters of the US, including wetlands. And then Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act requires the lead agency, GSA again, to look at the potential impact of their undertakings on cultural and historic properties, resources, that is. Next. So there are 5 main phases of the NEPA process. We're in the very first one right here, performing public scoping. After that is preparing the draft environmental assessment, and then public review of that assessment, and then finally the issuance of a final EA followed by a decision document. So let's talk a little bit about scoping. Next slide. The purpose of scoping is to gather input from the public, agencies, and other interested parties, all of whom we refer to as stakeholders, on the proposed development of a new replacement LPOE at Porthill, Idaho. Your comments are going to help us decide which alternatives need to be looked at and which resource areas should be examined in the EA. Next. There are four major components of an environmental assessment: purpose and need, alternatives, affected environment, and environmental consequences. The purpose and need asks, what is the agency, GSA, trying to achieve? What's the project all about? The second one, alternatives, is how can that purpose and need be met? How can it be achieved? Affected environment asks which resources might potentially be affected by the various alternatives. And then environmental consequences actually examines what those effects might be, as well as what can be done to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts, especially those that are potentially significant. Next slide. So on the purpose and need, it's in this case, it is to modernize and expand the Porthill Land Port of Entry. That's the purpose. The need is to meet the current operational needs of the facility while accommodating the appropriate traffic routing and positioning of the inspection facilities, and to expand the square footage of the buildings to support the park staff and other personnel. Next. Alternatives. There's going to be a total of 3 alternatives in this EA. 2 of them are so-called action alternatives, and they would consist of port expansion activities at the existing LPOE. And these alternatives differ in the amount of the proposed demolition that they would entail. So they're different enough that they warrant being called 2 separate alternatives. And then per NEPA requirements, we have something called the no action alternative, which is part of every NEPA document, both EAs and EIXSs. The LPOE under the no action alternative will continue to operate under existing conditions, and no construction and no demolition would take place. Next. The third part of the EA is the affected environment. What are the existing conditions of the resource areas at the LPOE? And in this case, we're referring to water quality, air quality, wildlife, land use, traffic, socioeconomic conditions, cultural resources, all of the many different types of the environment, the human environment that exist in the vicinity of the LPOE. It could potentially be affected. And then finally, next, environmental consequences then looks at each of these potentially affected resources and asks 3 main questions, and does an analysis that attempts to answer these 3 main issues or categories or criteria: the magnitude, how much of an effect there would be from each alternative on a given resource area; what would be the duration or frequency of that impact, how long might it last; and then the last extent here geographically is how far would that impact extend from the land port of entry itself. Next. So the next steps in the NEPA process are these. As I mentioned before, we're going to move into the draft EA analysis. That's an analysis of the resource areas with the potential to be impacted by the proposed action. We will prepare and issue the draft EA. When that is released, there's going to be a public meeting. GSA will host another one to solicit comments on the document. And then we will take those comments, review and consider them, and then incorporate them into the draft EA and provide responses to them. And then finally, a final EA will be released. Next. So the end of the conclusion of the NEPA process is this. After the publication of the final EA and consideration of all public input, GSA will make a decision based on the analysis and findings of the EA. If GSA determines that the action will not have a significant environmental effect, GSA will issue a finding of no significant impact, or FONSI. And the FONSI is a document that presents the reasons why GSA has concluded that there are no significant environmental impacts predicted to occur with the implementation of whatever action is chosen. And then if the EA, alternatively, if the EA determines that environmental impacts of the proposed federal action will be significant, an EIS is going to be prepared. So you can see the two arrows going in separate directions at the bottom at the conclusion of the NEPA process. Either a FONSI, there's no significant impact, or if there is a significant impact, going in the other direction, preparation of an EIS, an environmental impact statement. Next. And now Kim's going to say a few words about cultural resources.
Hi there. So I'm going to talk just for a second about the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. So part of that act is Section 106, and it establishes a consultation process for federal agencies to identify historic cultural resources that could be affected by the project. And it requires us to, if we are going to affect them negatively, to look for ways to avoid or minimize those effects. Part of this consultation process is also reaching out to stakeholders, including the public and other agencies, to see if there are any cultural resources on this property that we don't know about. So to that end, that's part of this meeting. National Historic Preservation Act is a separate law from NEPA, but we do them at the same time. They have slightly different processes, but you know, a historic property can be a building, a structure, an archaeological site, a ceremonial site, cultural landscape, you know, a place that is significant to local tribe, could be any of those things. So if there's anything like that that you are all aware of, we would be appreciative to know about those things. We do have one historic property on the LPOE property, which is the old port building, which is listed in the National Register. We do not believe we'll be affecting that building. We still do own that building. But we are going to be conducting surveys to explore what resources are on the property and determine if any of them are historic and what might happen to them. So that is our current situation. We are getting ready to kick off on those studies. You go ahead to the next one, Robbie. So right now, so we're on at the bottom, you can see the Section 106 process. We're still at the far left. We're determining the presence of historic properties on the property we don't even know yet. So like Leon said, you know, we're reaching out to the public to gather information on what, if any, historic properties there may be. So that is all I had to say today. Go to the next one. I guess, Emily, we go back to you. Oh, Leon.
You are correct. It'll be me.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim, and Leon as well, and Melissa for all your presentations. So I did want to point out before we open up the virtual floor for comments, we do have another option for public comment period. So right now you see the first red arrow. We're at the public, our initial one for this Porthill project, and it does end June 5th. And on the next slide, I'll go over all the options that you have to submit any comments that you may have, even positive ones, by June 5th. And then when we'll have the second public review period, it'll be during the actual draft EA environmental assessment, because we'll release that, and that'll be in a form of being released through a press release. And then that'll be uploaded as well to our project webpage that I mentioned earlier. And then you'll have another 30-day comment period to review and make any comments, provide any feedbacks that you may have. And I also want to just point out is that I would provide you a date, or at least a time frame, but we're currently doing some updates to our Porthill schedule. So at this time, I don't have a specific time frame to give you on that next draft EA public review period. But as soon as we know it, everyone, like you received before, there'll be public notices, you'll see a press release, you'll see newspaper ads. We'll go through the same route again and hopefully reach everyone. And you can also request to be added on our stakeholders list as well. So we have different options for you. And then I'll go over on our next slide all the hopefully helpful options that we have available for you, and hopefully it provides some ease to submit public comments. So during the meeting, we have a comment form that you can fill out. You can also speak during the meeting. I hope you feel comfortable enough to speak. Again, it looks like we ended pretty early, so if we have plenty of time to let you go over those 2 minutes if needed. And then you also can email your comments if you want to absorb everything that's here. Once you get a chance to review the handouts, you go to the project webpage. You can email your comments to Porthill LPOE at gsa.gov. And just please, if you can remember in the subject line, you can add other items if you want, but just call out the Porthill LPOE so we know it's for that project. And also one thing I do, because it does kind of run into each other, Porthill has 2 L's ending, but you want to make sure when you send that email that you add that LPOE in there, because that is for Land Port of Entry. And then you can also mail your comments as well, but just make sure here you put attention to myself. My contact information is there in Tacoma, and we're in Suite 610. So if you have that option, if you prefer to do that option, please do. And then hopefully you can see it. If not, when it's uploaded, you'll be able to see in the presentation. But we also have Christy Chittister-Vodasek, who is our PAO, our Public Affairs Officer. And so you can also, her contact information is within here as well. And you can reach her for press inquiries only. But if you're not the press, please do contact the Porthill LPOE, or you can mail your comments to me as well. And then from there, I'll go ahead and refer to the chat box and see if we have any questions. And then if not, then we'll start and open it up to anyone that wants to make any comments. And if you can just raise your hand. I think there's an option to raise your hand as well.
Emily, we did not get any question.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And just for everyone's reference, I did just drop an online version of the comment form and those handouts and the physical comment form as well for everyone to download.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and pause and let anyone raise their hand or speak if they would like to, hopefully. Lars, please do speak. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this presentation tonight. We appreciate the information very much. I'm the owner of the property that you had circled in your diagram of the expansion if the project ends up going in that direction. Our business up here has multiple parcels and multiple buildings. It's called Jake's Landing. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the area, but I wanted to make you aware that we are the only business that is west of the point of entry there off of Highway 1. So any structure on that side, except for one gentleman who has a home south of us, it looks to me, based on your presentation, that we will be the ones that will be the most affected if the government decides to go in that direction after all the studies and things. So I would like to make sure that I am definitely on whatever progression list or whatever there is. At this point, I don't even know what questions I might have, but certainly in the future I will have questions. So I talked with I don't have the note in front of me, Joseph Donk from the GSA. You guys,
it'll be Joseph Bonk.
Bonk, yes.
Yeah, he's our asset manager.
Okay, so I've spoken with him, and he sent me some documents for us to sign to allow a visitor to come on the property and things. We signed that last fall, and we haven't heard anything. He told me that we would receive a notification so that we could be there on site if we wished. Do you know when that might be, that step might be coming up?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Lars. I remembered you. I was on the right. You're referring to the right of entry calls that we had. We had some virtual meetings prior to even starting the NEPA. And so you're correct. Joseph Bonk, who is our asset manager, he would have contacted all the possible landowners that may be impacted by this proposed project. So it's not, like I want to say, nothing is set in stone. It hasn't been decided if we would be expanding out that much towards your property, but again, it's a possibility. It's something that's being proposed. And so right now we're still working on planning those site visits when we would need to do that. And you definitely will still be receiving that notification as we discussed and agreed to. No one will enter your property without you knowing it. And you'll be hearing, really, it will be for me and Joseph will be coordinating that. And it would include Solve consultants that would be on there, as well as possibly the cultural resources as well.
Fantastic. And yes, I remember you as well, Emily, and appreciated that call last, I think it was last August. I know that there's a time frame, but it seems like, you know, the time frame usually gets elongated. Do you have a general guess as to when they might want to utilize that entry permission? Just general.
Yeah.
I know I won't hold you to it. I know it's, you know, it can change at any time. Fully aware. Just trying to get a ballpark in my head what to expect.
Sure. What I'll do is later on, before we end, I'll look through our previous schedule and just give you a ballpark of what it may be. But I just want you to know it may change just depending on how the schedule changes. So I don't want you to hold us to it, but it looks like you're already aware of that. But I'll go ahead and look that up for you.
Okay. And I'm grateful for the second comment period, because like I said, right now, I don't even know what questions to think about, let alone ask. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I believe Cindy McQueen was next. I see her hand up. And I think you put your question in the chat box. If someone wants to read that. I have a little.
I can read it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, it says, I don't think I heard any justification for the reason for the proposed expansion. How does the current facility not meet the needs? And Melissa, I think that this is a question for you.
Hi, Cindy. CBP has, so the original port was built in 1930. Then they built the new one in 1967. So since that time, there has been a lot of changes within CBP, their mission, how they do their business, the different technologies that they want to incorporate. And right now, the building is like I said, approximately 3,000 square feet. They're looking to expand to slightly over 9,000 square feet, which will help the officers move within the space, be able to perform their mission needs. They're increasing a lane to better improve the traffic flow on those busy days that they have. But it's basically the current port is not meeting their needs in order for them to do their mission. Does that better explain?
Okay, sorry. We may have some traffic noise because we're by the highway here as we're trying to listen. So I guess I'm still not sure how, I mean, I guess maybe I haven't been there on a really busy day. Every time I've come through, I've been like one of one car to come through the port of entry. But granted, I'm not there all the time. And I guess I'm trying to figure out why do they need 3 times as much space? They're going from 3,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet. I mean, I don't know how many officers do we have in there, and how much room do they need to move around? I'm generally right. I figure if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And you think it's broke, but I haven't still really heard exactly what it is that's broken.
So I would like, can I take this this question back to CBP to get, because I don't want to speak, since I don't have CBP here on the line. I don't want to misspeak. I could answer that question, propose a question to CBP and provide a written response to that. But I can tell you, I too haven't been at the port very often, but just going to the port, talking with the officers, seeing how they work, it's very inefficient. And I know that they do have busy times like in the summer for concerts and travel and things like that. But if you don't mind, I could get a better response from them and come back with that.
Yeah, I think we'd appreciate that. That'd be good to hear.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. And I believe, Keith, if I got your name wrong, sorry, but I remember, I think I spoke with you yesterday. But yes, we'll definitely, thanks for putting that comment or that question and comment in the chat box, because that's something we will take back, we'll review and have a discussion with CBP on, like Melissa did state in there. And I did want to circle back. I see you, Mark. I did want to circle back to Lars. I was looking at the schedule and it looks like we're planned to do the actual site visits on June 5th through June 9th. So that those will be approaching very soon, but you'll still receive an actual formal notification from GSA for those and to go over the times and everything that will be out there.
Thank you for that very much, Emily. I'm going to put it out there now. June 5th, I know, is not a good day for us, but probably the rest of the week is. So I just put that up there. I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but throwing it out.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, Mark, I see your hand up. You've been patient. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm with Senator Jim Risch's North Idaho office. I appreciate you putting this on and taking the public input and letting the public know what's going on. It's good to hear from CBP about the expanded the traffic there, the busyness there. We've been working with them on expanding the hours, and so that's good to hear them mention that traffic is robust there, and so maybe we can make those hours permanent. But my question is that, so I noticed the two alternatives. One's no action alternative, and then one is expanding. It looks like taking the private property. Would that be through eminent domain ultimately? And I didn't see an alternative. It seems that to the east, I believe, that the federal government owns the property there. There's no consideration of, instead of using the private, expanding on the private property and acquiring that, using an expansion upon the already owned federal land. So just a little confused about that.
Sure. So I'll go over the actual site acquisition portion of things. What will happen is that we're not planning on eminent domain at this point. It's working with, that was part of when we did our initial right of entry calls, was to hopefully work out with those proposed property owners on relocation services. Like GSA has a relocation officer available, and we'll work with them if it comes to that point. If it's decided that their properties or their property is the one that we may be impacting, then that's when GSA will work with them on those relocations. We're definitely not starting with eminent domain. That's not something we want to start with, at least right now, and that's what we've discussed previously. As for expanding to the east side, I would have to refer to CBP on the reasoning behind that as well, but that's something to definitely follow up on, because there was no, at least that's not something that we discussed as an option to do that way. It seemed like it was all either west or somewhat south being proposed.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Well, I imagine we'll probably be talking with CBP too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Emily, could I interject here a second?
Is this, yes, Lars, I see you.
It's Lars, yes. I wanted to just directly ask Mark a question. Mark, I appreciate the fact that you're here from Senator Risch's office. I would really love to be able to have the opportunity to contact you and visit with you. I don't know if you were one of the 26 folks that came to visit Idaho back in September of 2021. They all had lunch with us there at Fort Hill. And I've really been trying to find a contact within Senator Risch's office since our business has been impacted for sure more than, well, I won't say anybody, but definitely most in this county, to the tune of a lot of, well, so I would really appreciate, Mark, if that's a possibility. Thank you for letting me take that time to mention that.
Yep, I'll reach out to you tomorrow. I'll give you a call.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Lars.
Hey, Emily, this is Rick Rocker. I don't know if we could go back to maybe the timeline slide. I think that would maybe, we could talk through a little bit about kind of how.
The milestones, project milestones?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, got it. Robbie, can you go back a few slides for that? Thank you.
This one or further back?
Well, a little
It would be,
back.
yeah. It would be during Melissa's portion of the project.
Gotcha. 1 second.
There we go. Oh,
Right. Yeah.
there we go. Yes.
Yes. I think it's important just to highlight, so, you know, like we all talked about, we're in the NEPA stage, and there's going to be some public opportunities to comment and some interaction there. But what Melissa said, we're awarding this project development study, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road as far as us really delving into the actual project requirements and how we see ourselves building the new facility. So there's going to be a lot of architect engineers involved in this process here, and so coming out of that, that's when we'll kind of know what we want to do as far as planning wise. And so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but coming out of that is kind of when we would start, you know, talking to potential folks that we need to acquire land or things like that. So I just want to, you know, we got a little bit of time before that kind of starts happening. This project development study, you know, run approximately a year or so. So we have some time coming up to work through some of those issues. So.
Thank you, Rick. And so for everyone knows, Rick Rickow is with GSA. He's on our D&C team, design and construction team. And then Cindy, I see your hand up. I don't know if it went down and it went back up, but I want to make sure just address that. I don't want to leave you hanging.
Sorry, we didn't mean to have it up. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I don't see anyone else's hand up, but I don't want to stop the comment period. And hopefully I'm not missing anything in the chat, but I know Robbie or someone will let me know if there's a question in there. So while we're waiting, I do just want to go back over and just reiterate. Oh, never mind. Sorry, I see Caleb. Caleb Davis.
Hi there, Caleb Davis here from Congressman Russ Fulcher's office in Coeur d'Alene. I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Mark was saying regarding the lanes that are supposed to be expanded. Did I understand you correctly to say that it's going to be one additional lane? Is that right? Potentially.
That's correct.
Is that for, I know that there's one for permit commercial lanes. Is it that particular type of lane that's going to be expanded, or what kind?
So the idea of the lane, the expanded lanes, so they're going to have high-low booths so that it could run in any of the lanes, commercial or POV. It's to help provide some flexibility during busier times.
And has CBP stated anything with regard to need for that expansion to accommodate traffic flows? Have they been on the record regarding that?
When the feasibility study was taking place in 2018, that was one of their needs, the requirements of the feasibility study to expand their lanes.
Is that something I would be able to have access to be able to see? Would you be able to provide that?
That's something, hi Caleb, that's something I'll have to check just to make sure, because that document is considered CUI, so classified information. So that's something I'll check with my department, and I'll follow up with you.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. I very much appreciate that, Emily.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're welcome. Oh, definitely. And I have a question, just as to make sure I have your contact information. It's already included in there, just your email address. I'm assuming you provide it for registration, or did you want me to use something else?
No, that would be perfect. Yeah,
Perfect.
why not
Okay.
use the register?
Got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see if I don't miss anyone else. And so I want to open it up to see if anyone wanted us to go back over anything. I do appreciate all the comments we received so far and questions. We have some follow-ups to definitely do with those that spoke today. Again, we will be on here. We're still set to go until 7. GSA will stay on here. So if you wanted to stay on or join back up again, just let us know. Or if you wanted us to go over anything again, we can do that. We just want to make sure, at least, again, we share what we have for you. We're limited on certain information right now, but as we go through this process, we'll have more to share, definitely during the draft environmental assessment portion of this public comment period, or when we get to that period. So if not, I'm taking a silence where no one wants us to go back over anything, at least right now. So if you would like, we'll go ahead and pause the well, not pause, but we'll pause this part right now. Even though we'll be on here, you don't have to stay on. You can log off, and but we'll still be on. And I thank everyone for your attendance, and thank you to all the presenters as well.